I have here a Bushnell TRS-25 red dot sight. I do not believe it's the trophy version, I think it's the original. And we've found a problem. The problem is the emitter selector switch here that determines the intensity of the red dot. It's very, very stiff. I found there's forum entries about it, but there's no tutorials or any explanation as to why or how to fix it. So that's what we're about to do in this video, is try to figure out if we can fix it. It's attached to my Smith & Wesson 22A barrel and frame because this screw here has a very, very small torque spec. I believe it's 15 inch-pounds, and it was loosening up. So I put some blue thread lock on there, and I do not want to take that off. Before it was loosening up, I tightened it too much and it snapped. So if it does snap, it's an odd size. You might as well call Bushnell. They'll send you one for significantly cheaper than you can get it even at Fastenal. The first thing we're going to have to do here is open this battery cover, which shouldn't be a problem when the selector switch is extremely stiff. You can just turn it. It's more likely to come off than the selector switch is to turn. Underneath we have a standard CR2032 with a O-ring around the outside of these prongs. So we can take this O-ring off and then pull the battery out. Easy as that. Underneath is this circuit board. Now the difficult part about this is there's this retention ring here. You can see the gap in it right there. A lot of the red dots, the retention ring for the circuit board, it actually threads in. On the TRS-25, it does not thread in. It's basically just a spring clip. So not going to be able to do anything by trying to turn it and get it to basically unthread out. You're going to have to use a little bit of a pry underneath there to pop it out. There's also a second ring that these prongs are attached to. That second ring is soldered to the board, so when you are trying to pry this upper retention ring out, you don't want to go down under the second one and pry underneath these prongs. That would be a bad idea. So we'll try to stay above board here and get this little spring out. And it might help to push down on the circuit board while trying to pry it out, because there's a little bit of a gap there in the plastic that the ring fits into. Maybe you can give it a little bit of a separation, a little leeway there to pop out. Once you get it popped out a little bit on one side, you can see it's just a little spring. You can pull it the rest of the way out, and we'll just set it aside for later when we have to try to install it, which is even more fun than pulling it out. Then this circuit board comes out very easily, just like that. If you have emitter issues with the intensity where it flashes and it doesn't stay a consistent brightness, on the underside of here you see all these little contacts, these pads. You can use a standard eraser on any pencil to just basically erase them clean. You can see here there's a mark on that one. That's not a very good electrical contact. With that mark, it gets dirty. You can do a little erasing, it'll clean up that contact and you'll have a much more stable dot. Underneath that we have this metal clip here and the electrodes that those pads actually contact. So you'll see here there are 6 screws. You're going to have to remove those 6 screws in order to see how this thing is functioning. For this, I recommend using a very small, probably a Phillips 1, if not a Phillips 0, to get in there. You don't want it to be too pointy, because if you don't get it seated in there very well, you're going to end up stripping the Phillips, which you can see one of them here is a little bit stripped. That was that way the first time I opened it up, believe it or not. Which makes me wonder if this is actually put together in a factory by a machine or by a person. Or if it was one that was opened previously and then returned to the store. I think I got it brand new. Okay, so I pulled that off with the selector switch here. You can see the circuit board beneath. This is a fixed board. It doesn't move, it doesn't budge. It has a little bit of a riser. I don't know if you can even see that. Sits up just a little bit, not very much. It's got this rubber all over where the threads go for those screws. Because of this rubber, I'm not too concerned about how loose I put the screws in. It's going to hold them pretty well. If I were concerned a lot about how loose the screws were going to be, I would use blue thread lock. I would not use red thread lock. The only way to undo red thread lock is by heat, and electronics don't like heat very much. So inside of this selector switch, you've got a metal ring with some divots. Each of those divots corresponds with one of the intensity levels. And then this metal piece that had the 6 screws, get the screws out of there, you can see is just a flat ring with a bend in it. It's on both sides. This bend goes into each divot. That's how it clicks into each position. This, with the 6 screws, is really what's holding this down and causing it to be very stiff, because the underside of this has an O-ring. I don't know if you can see that very well right there, but this is in fact an O-ring that seals all the way around on the bottom of it. So when you compress this against the frame around this fixed circuit board with the 6 screws, it makes it very, very stiff, and it will not, in fact, turn easily at all. So the way we're going to solve this problem, we're going to put it right back together, and we're just going to very, very lightly install those screws. I'm going to put them in to the point that they barely tighten down. Once I feel the first little bit of resistance, I'm going to stop. And then I'm going to try and turn it, and we'll see if that makes a significant difference. Okay, that's all 6 screws in there, just barely finger tight. By the way, if you end up pulling this all the way out instead of just loosening the screws up, that rubber that's around these threads is going to be all underneath this, and it's going to be in those little divots. I don't think cleaning it out will hurt anything. So you notice mine was nice and clean. I definitely did that earlier. It did not, however, solve the problem of this being stiff. You are going to have to loosen those screws in order to loosen this up. So now I'd like to try it. Oh, that's way better. It turns nice and easy. There's still a good audible click. I barely turned them in until they started to get resistance. I could back them out a little bit more. Maybe we go a half a turn on each of these. Try it again. Oh, that's beautiful. Again, I'm not very concerned about anything getting past the O-ring on the bottom. I could have probably just removed the O-ring and call it a day, which you could probably do with a dental pick. Pull it out and cut it. It might just fall out and you won't have to worry about loosening it. But I have a feeling how tight this was, you won't be able to get under there unless you get to these screws. When you go to put this circuit board back, after you've ideally cleaned it on those pads, you'll notice here that there's a bunch of resistors all the way around. These correspond to each of the intensity levels. Then there's one pad that doesn't have any resistors. The idea here is this pad with no resistors does not have a connection from one to the other. This is your off position. On the back side, that off position has this bar here. It's a nice little line. You're going to need to know that when you put it together, if you set it up at the 0 position right here on that dot, then this pad is going to have to align with the two contactors to be in the right orientation. If you have it offset any from there, then your positions are not going to line up appropriately. You're going to turn it on and it won't turn on, or you'll turn it off and it will be very bright. Depends on how you misalign it. So what I found here is that that line will go between, I don't know if you can see that, it will go between the 0 and the 1 on this one. I assume they're all the same. With that in position comes the most fun part of this entire job, which is putting this little spring clip back in. This thing is a royal pain to try to get in. I find that if you push down on the circuit board very hard, you open up a little bit of a gap down here that you can force that thing into. So we'll give it a shot here on camera. Okay, again, I apologize for the limited view. As you could see, I basically ended up using 2 flathead screwdrivers. Got it started inside the slot underneath the threads over here. And then as I got part of it around, I then switched to the other screwdriver in my other hand, and I pushed down on one while holding the other one with the screwdriver until I made it all the way around. And now once it's properly inserted, this circuit board will not turn, which is good. This is still lined up between the 0 and the 1. And I have a little slot here which tells me that this is fully inserted. So that's where you want to be once you get it in. It's a pain. As you could see, it takes a lot of effort. Keep working at it, you can get there. Okay, once you have that in, you just put the battery back in, throw the O-ring around it. And at this point, after this O-ring is back around all of these connectors, we can go ahead and put the battery cover back on. If you want to check to make sure that your alignment of that circuit board is right, I believe you can check that. Yep, there's the dot. Without putting the battery cover back on, see, this is turning very nice and easy, and the dot gets brighter and brighter and brighter. We get up to 11, back to 0. There's been a lot of complaints that I have also seen about the red glow that you can kind of see up here where my finger is right now. And as it gets brighter in intensity and this moves around, you'll also see a little bit of a red ring around the outside. Apparently this is bothering a lot of people. It doesn't bother me. When I'm looking through and I'm seeing the dot and I'm putting it on the target, I don't notice a red glow, haze, ring, nothing of the sort. I'm looking at the dot and the target. If it bothers you, I'm afraid there's been no fix for that yet. So once your battery cover is back in place, which this time you're definitely going to have to hold it to get it in there, then you're done. Nice and easy. Hope that solves your problem. Thank you for watching.